She was just a maid, studying medical books in secret after everyone slept. He was a mafia boss who'd lost faith in second chances. The night he found her in his library, surrounded by dreams she thought were dead, he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. The gunshot still echoed in Marcus Dante's ears as he pushed through the mahogany doors of his mansion at 1:47 a.m. He wasn't supposed to be home. The meeting with the Costello family should have kept him at the docks until sunrise, but Lorenzo Costello had taken a bullet meant for his son, and suddenly everyone forgot about territory disputes and shipping routes. They just wanted to get their boss to a hospital. Marcus had watched the old man bleed out on the concrete, surrounded by a dozen armed men who couldn't do a damn thing to help him. No doctor would come. Not to that part of Chicago. Not for people like them. 3 minutes, Marcus thought as he loosened his tie, blood still staining his cuff. That's all it would have taken. 3 minutes with someone who knew what they were doing. He needed a drink. Or 3. The mansion was dark. His housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, had gone home hours ago, and his head of security, Jake Morrison, was still coordinating the cleanup at the docks. Marcus walked through the marble foyer, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the floor, and headed toward his study. That's when he saw the light. A soft, golden glow spilling from beneath the library doors. Marcus's hand moved instinctively to the Glock tucked against his spine. In his line of work, unexpected lights meant unexpected problems. He approached silently, years of street training overriding the exhaustion in his bones. He eased the door open. A young woman sat cross-legged on the Persian rug, surrounded by books like a fortress. She wore the plain gray uniform of his household staff, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Textbooks lay open around her, thick, intimidating volumes with titles like Gray's Anatomy and Emergency Medical Procedures. She was so absorbed in her reading that she didn't hear him enter. Marcus recognized her, though he'd never spoken to her directly.
Elena Rodriguez.
She'd been working here for,
What?
6 months? Maybe 8? The quiet one who kept her head down and never asked for anything. He watched her for a moment, fascinated despite himself. Her lips moved as she read, one finger tracing diagrams of the human heart. On a notepad beside her, she'd sketched the cardiac system in meticulous detail, labeling each chamber and valve. The floorboard creaked under his weight. Elena's head snapped up, her brown eyes going wide with terror. Books tumbled from her lap as she scrambled to her feet, nearly tripping over a stack of medical journals. Mr. Dante, I'm so sorry, I thought you wouldn't be back until morning, and her words tumbled out in a panic. I'll put everything away right now. I promise this won't happen again. Please don't. Stop, Marcus held up one hand, his voice cutting through her rambling. He stepped into the light, and Elena's face went pale. His shirt was speckled with Lorenzo's blood. His knuckles were scraped from a confrontation earlier in the evening. He looked like exactly what he was, a man who'd just left a crime scene. But Marcus wasn't looking at her with anger. He was looking at the books. Emergency Medical Procedures. Advanced Trauma Life Support. Surgical Techniques for Emergency Medicine. His eyes moved to her notebook, to her careful sketches of arteries and veins. Why these books? He asked quietly. Elena's mouth opened, then closed. She wrapped her arms around herself, a defensive posture he recognized from years of reading body language. Fight or flight, and she couldn't do either. She swallowed hard. I shouldn't be using your library without permission. I understand if you need to let me go. That's not what I asked. Marcus moved closer, his shadow falling across the open textbooks. Why are you reading about emergency medicine at 2 a.m? Elena looked down at her feet, at the books, at anything but his face. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Because people die when they shouldn't have to. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He thought of Lorenzo bleeding out because no doctor would come. He thought of his mother, 20 years ago, dying of a heart attack in their South Side apartment while they waited for an ambulance that arrived 45 minutes too late. Explain, he said. Elena lifted her chin, meeting his eyes for the first time. There was something fierce in her gaze, something that didn't match the timid maid who scrubbed his floors and avoided his glance. I was pre-med at Northwestern, she said. Full scholarship. Top 5% of my class. I was going to be a surgeon, her voice cracked slightly. Then my father got sick. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The medical bills. We thought we had insurance, but there were loopholes, clauses, things we didn't understand until it was too late. Marcus said nothing, letting her continue. After Dad died, we found out about the second mortgage he'd taken out. The loans from, she hesitated, choosing her words carefully. From people in your line of work, Mr. Dante. $60,000 at 30% interest. My mom couldn't pay. They came for the house, for everything. And you, Marcus finished. And me, Elena's jaw tightened. I dropped out to work off the debt. Your people, not you directly, but one of your associates, they arranged this position. I clean houses until the debt is paid. Another 3 years, they said. Marcus processed this, pieces clicking into place.
Miguel Santos, probably.
He ran the loan operations and had a habit of putting debtors to work in legitimate businesses. It kept them visible, controllable, and out of trouble. You didn't answer my question, Marcus said. Why are you still studying? Elena looked at the books scattered around her feet, at the sketches of hearts and lungs and the delicate networks that kept human beings alive. Because I made a promise to my father, she said softly. He died in our living room, Mr. Dante. Not in a hospital. Not with doctors or morphine or dignity. Just on our couch, in pain, scared. I held his hand and I promised him that I would finish what I started. That I would become the doctor he believed I could be. She finally looked up at him, and there were no tears in her eyes. Just determination. So I work your floors during the day and I study at night. Even if I never get to use it. Even if it's just words in my head. I keep the promise. The library fell silent except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. Marcus stared at this woman, this maid, this debtor, this ghost in his house, and saw someone he hadn't expected to find. Someone who reminded him of the kid he used to be, before the streets hardened him into Marcus Dante. You're reading the wrong books, he said finally.
Elena Blinket, comme vous said.
Sir? Emergency medicine, trauma support, that's good. But if you want to be a surgeon, you need to understand systems. Start with vascular surgery. Then, cardiothoracic, he walked to one of his bookshelves and pulled down a leather-bound volume. This was my mother's. She worked as a surgical nurse before she died. Take it. He held out the book. Elena stared at it like it might bite her. Mr. Dante, I can't. You can, he pressed it into her hands. Be here tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. We're going to have a conversation about your debt and your future. I don't understand. Marcus moved toward the door, then paused and looked back at her. At the books, at the determination in her eyes, at the promise she kept to a dead father. 3 minutes, he said quietly. That's all it takes to save a life if you know what you're doing. I watched a man die tonight because no one around him had those 3 minutes of knowledge. He thought of his mother, of Lorenzo, of all the bodies he'd seen dropped by bullets and blades and bad luck. Maybe it's time that changed, he said. Then he left her standing in the library, surrounded by medical books and questions, holding his mother's journal like a treasure she didn't deserve but desperately needed. Elena looked down at the leather cover, at the gold-embossed initials, M.D.
Maria Dante.
And for the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself to hope. Elena didn't sleep. She sat in her small attic room, staring at Maria Dante's surgical journal until the words blurred together. Every page was filled with careful notes, hand-drawn diagrams, observations from operating rooms. A life dedicated to healing, preserved in ink. At 5:45 a.m., she changed into a fresh uniform and made her way to the kitchen. Her hands shook as she prepared coffee, the expensive Italian blend Marcus preferred. She had no idea what this meeting meant, but experience taught her that when powerful men wanted to talk, It rarely ended well for people like her. Marcus appeared at exactly 6 o'clock, looking nothing like the blood-stained figure from last night. He wore a charcoal suit, his dark hair still damp from a shower. But his eyes carried the weight of sleepless hours. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the kitchen table.
Elena hesitated.
Staff didn't sit with Marcus Dante. They served and disappeared. "That wasn't a request, Elena." She sat, spine straight, hands folded in her lap like a student called to the principal's office. Marcus poured 2 cups of coffee and placed one in front of her. The gesture was so unexpected that she nearly knocked it over. "I did some research this morning," Marcus said, settling into the chair across from her. "Called in some favors, pulled some files. You want to know what I found?" Elena's throat tightened. "Sir, You graduated high school with a 40. Perfect score on your SAT. Full scholarship to Northwestern. Not just tuition, but room and board, stipend, everything. In your first year of pre-med, you got straight A's while working 2 part-time jobs to send money home." He took a sip of his coffee, eyes never leaving hers. "Your professors wrote recommendations calling you the most promising student they'd seen in a decade." Elena felt her face flush. That was a long time ago. 3 years. "You're 24 years old, Elena. That's not a long time. That's barely any time at all." Marcus leaned forward. "Your father borrowed money from Rafael Santos, one of my loan operations. $60,000 at 30% interest. You know what the contract said." She knew. She'd read it 100 times, looking for loopholes that didn't exist. If he couldn't pay, the debt transferred to next of kin, with penalties. Wrong. Marcus pulled out a document and slid it across the table. The original loan was $60,000. But Santos added processing fees and administrative costs and inflated it to $95,000. Then, when your mother couldn't pay after your father died, he added another $40,000 in collection expenses. Elena stared at the numbers. "That's not." "The papers I signed said what Santos wanted them to say. He does this. Finds desperate people, buries them in debt, and profits off their labor for years." Marcus's jaw tightened. "It's technically legal."
"Barely."
"But it's not how I run my operations." "I don't understand. You're saying the debt is illegal?" "I'm saying it's unconscionable." Marcus pulled out another document, this one stamped with an official seal. "I bought your debt this morning. All $135,000 of it, including the interest Santos claimed you owed." Elena's world tilted. "Why would you do that?" "Because I can." He pushed the paper toward her. "And because I'm about to do something else." With a red pen, Marcus drew a single line through the document. Then he signed his name at the bottom. "As of 6 a.m. today, your debt is cleared. You don't owe me, Santos, or anyone else a single dollar." The words didn't make sense. Elena stared at the crossed-out numbers, at Marcus's signature, at the impossible thing happening in front of her. "Mr. Dante, I can't accept." "You're not accepting charity. You're accepting what should have happened 3 years ago. Someone with power using it to fix an injustice." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline turning gold with sunrise. "Last night, I watched a man die because no one around him knew how to stop the bleeding. My mother died the same way, a heart attack, and the ambulance took too long. You know what both situations had in common?" Elena shook her head, still reeling.
"Money."
"The ambulance came slow because we lived in the wrong neighborhood. Lorenzo died because doctors don't make house calls to crime scenes." Marcus turned back to her. "You want to be a doctor for the right reasons, Elena. Not for money or status. Because you watch someone you love suffer and you refuse to let it happen to anyone else. But my scholarship is gone. Northwestern won't take me back, and even if they would, I've missed 3 years. There's a program at Cook County Hospital. They accept returning students, especially ones with your record. It's not Northwestern, but the training is just as good. Better, actually, because you'll see real trauma cases. The kind that don't make it to private hospitals." Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes. "I can't afford." "You'll work here."
"Part-time."
20 hours a week doing what you do now, cleaning, organizing, whatever Mrs. Chin needs. But I'm paying you $40 an hour. That's enough to cover tuition and rent. $40 an hour to clean houses? Elena's voice cracked with disbelief. That's not reasonable. It's not about cleaning houses. Marcus moved back to the table, his presence commanding but not threatening. I'm investing in something more valuable than another maid. I'm investing in a doctor who understands what it means to be powerless, who won't forget where she came from. The tears came then, silent and unstoppable. Elena covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. Why? She whispered. You don't even know me. I know enough. Marcus's voice softened in a way she didn't think possible. My mother used to say that the measure of power isn't what you take, it's what you give away. She died before I really understood that. Maybe it's time I started learning. He placed a business card on the table. Dr. Sarah Chun at Cook County. She's expecting your call on Monday. I've already spoken to her about your situation. Elena looked up at him through blurred vision. What if I fail? What if I can't do this? Then you fail trying something that matters. That's more than most people ever do. Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. But I don't think you'll fail, Elena. People who study medical textbooks at 2 in the morning after working 12-hour days don't fail. They become the doctors that save lives like Lorenzo's. Like my mother's. He left her sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by impossible gifts and second chances, holding the business card like a lifeline. Outside the kitchen window, Chicago woke up to another day. But for Elena Rodriguez, everything had changed in the space of one conversation. She looked at her reflection in the polished surface of the coffee cup. For the first time in 3 years, the face looking back wasn't a maid drowning in debt. It was a woman who might still become a doctor. Marcus stood alone in his private office on the 3rd floor, the door locked, the curtains drawn. This room was his sanctuary, the only place in the mansion where he allowed himself to remember. The photograph sat in its usual spot on his desk. His mother, Maria Dante, at 35 years old, wearing her nursing scrubs and a tired but genuine smile. It had been taken at County General Hospital, back when she still believed the system would protect people like them. She'd been wrong. Marcus poured 3 fingers of whiskey into a crystal glass, even though it was barely 8 in the morning. Some memories required anesthesia. I did something today, Ma, he said quietly to the photograph. Something you would have done, if you'd had the power. He thought about Elena, about the tears streaming down her face when he'd crossed out that debt. He'd seen a lot of people cry in his line of work, from fear, from pain, from desperation. But Elena's tears had been different. They were the kind that came when someone drowning finally breaks the surface and remembers how to breathe. His mother would have understood that feeling. Marcus had been 17 when she died, 23 years ago, but the memory remained sharp enough to cut. It was a Tuesday night. He'd been at the community center, running a pickup basketball game with some neighborhood kids, one of the few legal things he did back then. His phone rang at 8:47 p.m. Marcus, it's your ma, his neighbor Mrs. Patterson had said, her voice shaking. She collapsed. We called 911, but he'd run the 12 blocks home in less than 10 minutes. Found his mother on the living room floor, Mrs. Patterson kneeling beside her, trying to remember CPR from a class she'd taken 30 years ago. The ambulance is coming, Mrs. Patterson kept saying. They're coming, Maria, just hold on. But Marcus had already seen too much street violence by then. He knew what dying looked like. His mother's face was gray. Her breathing came in gasps. Her hand clutched at her chest, fingers curled in pain that stole her ability to speak. Ma, I'm here, he'd said, dropping to his knees beside her. I'm right here. You're gonna be fine. She'd looked at him with eyes that knew better. With eyes that said goodbye, even though her mouth couldn't form the words. The ambulance arrived 43 minutes later. Marcus had timed it on his watch, each second burning into his memory like a brand. We got a cardiac case on the south side, he'd heard the dispatcher say when the EMTs finally walked through the door. Low priority neighborhood. Take your time. Low priority. His mother had died in the ambulance, 3 blocks from the hospital. The EMT, a kid barely older than Marcus, had looked at him with practiced sympathy and said, "I'm sorry. If we'd gotten here sooner, maybe we could have done something."
F.
Maybe. Marcus had buried those words along with his mother. And then he'd made sure no one would ever call him low priority again. He'd climbed through the organization fast, his intelligence and his rage, making him valuable to people who needed both. By 25, he was running his own crew. By 30, he'd eliminated enough rivals to control the entire South Side. By 35, Marcus Dante was a name that made even other criminals nervous. He'd built an empire on the same streets that had let his mother die. But power, he'd learned, came with its own kind of loneliness. He could buy anything, intimidate anyone, make problems disappear with a phone call. Yet he couldn't bring back the one person who'd believed he could be something other than this. His mother had wanted him to go to college, to be better than the neighborhood, to use his brain for something that built rather than destroyed. "You're smart, Marcus," she told him a week before she died. "Smart enough to be a doctor, a lawyer, anything you want. Don't let this place tell you who you have to be." He'd been accepted to Illinois State with a partial scholarship. His mother had been so proud, already planning how she'd pick up extra shifts to cover what the scholarship didn't. Then she died and college became irrelevant. He'd needed money for the funeral, for the debts she'd left behind, for survival. The streets offered faster solutions than classrooms. He told himself it was temporary.
Just until he got stable.
Just until he figured things out. 23 years later, he was still figuring it out. Marcus drank the whiskey, feeling it burn. Last night, watching Lorenzo bleed out, he'd seen his mother's death all over again. Different face, different circumstances, same helpless rage at watching someone die because the right help didn't come fast enough. Then he'd found Elena in his library, studying the same books his mother had once studied, reading about hearts and arteries and the delicate systems that kept people alive, pursuing the dream his mother never got to complete. It had felt like a sign. Marcus didn't believe in God. He'd seen too much darkness for that. But maybe, just maybe, he believed in redemption, in the possibility that power could be used for something other than control and fear. "I'm giving her the chance you never got, Ma," he said to the photograph. "The chance I never took. Maybe that counts for something." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out an old newspaper clipping. The headline read, "County Hospital Nurses Strike for Better Emergency Response Times." His mother was in the photo, holding a sign that said every neighborhood deserves a chance. She'd been fighting the system even then, trying to change things from inside. Marcus had fought from outside, using violence and intimidation. He'd made himself powerful enough that ambulances came immediately when his name was mentioned. But that didn't help anyone else. It just carved out a safe space for him while the rest of the South Side kept drowning. Elena represented something different. A chance to create actual change instead of just personal immunity. If she became a doctor, a good one, the kind who didn't see low-priority neighborhoods, then maybe his mother's death would mean something beyond just his origin story. Maybe it would become the reason someone else lived. Marcus heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Heavy, deliberate. Jake Morrison, his head of security. He locked the photograph back in his drawer and straightened his tie. The moment of vulnerability ended. Marcus Dante had work to do. But as Jake knocked and entered with the morning briefings, Marcus made a decision. He would protect Elena Rodriguez. Not just from debt collectors or rivals, but from every obstacle between her and that medical degree. It wasn't charity. It wasn't sentiment. It was the first truly good thing he'd done in 23 years. And maybe, just maybe, it was what his mother had been trying to teach him all along, that real power wasn't about what you could take or destroy. It was about what you chose to build. 2 weeks later, Elena stood outside the Southside Community Health Center, her stomach twisted in knots. The building looked like it had survived a war. Cracked windows patched with duct tape, graffiti covering the lower walls, a flickering neon sign that read, Wakayas Welko E. But through those battered doors, she could see people. Dozens of them, filling every chair in the waiting room. You must be Elena. A woman in scrubs appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. She was around 50, with gray streaks in her black hair and kind eyes that had seen too much.
I'm Dr. Sarah Chen.
Marcus said you'd be coming. Elena's hand trembled slightly as they shook. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Dr. Chen. I promise I won't. Let me stop you right there. Sarah gestured for her to come inside. I don't do favors for Marcus Dante. If you're here, it's because I believe you can handle it. His recommendation just got you in the door. What you do next is entirely on you. The clinic smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Every surface was clean but worn, equipment that looked 20 years old but meticulously maintained. Posters in English and Spanish covered the walls. Free diabetes screening, know the signs of stroke, vaccinations, no ID required. We serve about 200 patients a week, Sarah explained as they walked through the narrow hallway. Mostly uninsured or underinsured. People who can't afford the big hospitals or who don't trust them. We do what we can with what we have. A young mother rushed past them, carrying a crying toddler with a bloodied knee. Sarah didn't break stride, calling out in Spanish. Examination room 2, Rosa. Clean it well before you bandage it. You speak Spanish? Elena asked. You have to, in this neighborhood. You speak it. My father was from Mexico City. I grew up bilingual.
Good.
Half our patients don't speak English, and Google Translate doesn't work in emergencies. Sarah pushed open a door marked, Staff Only. Inside was a break room with a coffee maker, a small refrigerator, and a bulletin board covered in thank you cards and children's drawings. This is Dr. James Rivera, our other physician. Sarah nodded to a man in his 30s, exhausted but smiling. And Tommy Chun, no relation. Our physician's assistant. You've already met Rosa at the front desk. They nodded at Elena, sizing her up quickly. She recognized the look. They were wondering if she'd last. Elena's going to volunteer on weekends, Sarah continued. Start her off with vitals, basic tree of observation. She's pre-med, took 3 years at Northwestern before life got complicated. Life always gets complicated, James said, not unkindly. Question is whether you can handle it getting messy too. We don't do neat cases here. We do gunshot wounds that people won't report, diabetic crises in people who can't afford insulin, kids with asthma who live in mold-infested apartments. You ready for that? Elena thought about her father, dying on their couch. About Marcus's mother, waiting 43 minutes for an ambulance. About Lorenzo, bleeding out on the docks. I'm ready, she said. Sarah handed her a set of scrubs. Prove it. The first patient was a 7-year-old boy named Carlos with a fever of 103. Elena took his temperature, pulse, and blood pressure while his mother hovered anxiously. ¿Cuándo empezó la fiebre? Elena asked gently. When did the fever start?
Hace 3 días, Demoter replied.
3 days ago. No puedo pagar el hospital grande. Can't afford the big hospital. Elena nodded, making careful notes. She checked Carlos's throat, his ears, felt for swollen lymph nodes. The skills came back to her like muscle memory, things she'd learned in labs and practicums 3 years ago. Strep throat, most likely, Dr. Chen confirmed after examining him. Good catch on the swollen nodes. We'll do a rapid test and get him on antibiotics. The mother's relief was palpable.
¿Cuánto cuesta?
How much?
$10, Sarah said.
$10. YSI no tiens, está bien, and if you don't have it, it's okay. Elena watched the woman dig through her purse, counting out crumpled bills. $10. The same antibiotic would cost 10 times that at a pharmacy without insurance. By noon, Elena had seen 15 patients, a construction worker with an infected cut he'd been ignoring for a week, an elderly woman whose diabetes medication had run out, a teenager with a sprained ankle from basketball, 2 flu cases, and a man with chest pain who Dr. Rivera immediately sent to the emergency room. That's the hardest part, James told her during a quick lunch break, granola bars and coffee. Knowing when we can help and when we can't. That guy? He might be having a heart attack. We can stabilize him, but we can't do cardiac catheterization here. So we send him to county and hope he doesn't get lost in their system. Does that happen often? More than it should. James crushed his coffee cup. County's overwhelmed. They do their best, but people fall through cracks. That's why we're here. To catch them before they fall. In the afternoon, Elena assisted with wound care, watched Sarah stitch up a laceration, and learned how to properly wrap a sprained wrist. Her hands remembered the movements, and her mind soaked up everything like she'd been starving for it. Because she had been. At 6 p.m., as the last patient left, Sarah found Elena cleaning examination rooms. You don't have to do that.
Rosa handles cleanup.
I worked as a maid for 3 years, Elena said, wiping down surfaces. This is nothing. Sarah leaned against the doorframe, studying her. Marcus told me you dropped out to pay off your father's medical debt. That the loan shark inflated it until it was impossible to pay. Elena's hands stilled. He told you that? He also told me you studied medical textbooks at 2 in the morning after 12-hour shifts. That you kept your promise to your father even when it seemed pointless. Sarah moved closer. I need to know something, Elena. Are you here because Marcus made you feel obligated? Because if that's the case, this won't work. Obligation burns out. This job requires something more. Elena thought about Carlos's mother, counting out $10 with shaking hands. About the construction worker who'd almost lost his finger because he couldn't afford to miss work. About all the people in that waiting room who had nowhere else to go. I'm here because I remember what it feels like to be helpless, she said quietly. To watch someone you love suffer because you can't afford help. I'm here because these people deserve better than what they're getting. Sarah smiled, the first real smile Elena had seen from her all day. Good answer. You can come back next Saturday. Walking to the bus stop that evening, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Purpose. Her back ached, her feet hurt, and she smelled like disinfectant. But her hands had helped people today. Her knowledge, the knowledge she'd fought so hard to keep, had mattered. She pulled out her phone and typed a text to Marcus. Thank you. For everything. Today, I remembered why I wanted this. His response came quickly. You earned it. See you tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning. Back to the mansion, back to cleaning floors and organizing Marcus's library. But now it felt different. Not like servitude, but like a step on a path that was finally moving forward. Elena boarded the bus as the sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't look like a prison sentence. It looked like possibility. Rafael Santos slammed his fist on the conference table hard enough to make the whiskey glasses jump. You bought her debt for what? $135,000? That's my money, Marcus. My operation. Marcus didn't look up from the financial reports spread before him. They were in the private meeting room at the back of his legitimate business, a shipping company that actually did ship things, along with other, less legal cargo. Around a table sat his inner circle, Santos, Jake Morrison, Tony DeMarco, who ran the gambling operations, and Vincent Hayes, his money laundering specialist. Your operation that's been skimming 15% off the top, Marcus said calmly. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Santos's face went red. That's standard processing fees. It's theft. Marcus finally looked up, his eyes cold. You inflate debts, trap people in cycles they can't escape, and profit off their misery. That's not how we do business. That's exactly how we do business, Tony interjected, lighting a cigar. With respect, boss, we're not running a charity. These people borrow money they can't pay back. That's on them. Is it? Marcus leaned back in his chair. Or is it on the predatory interest rates and hidden fees that make repayment impossible? Since when do you care about being fair? Santos shot back. You built this organization on fear and force. Now suddenly you're worried about ethics because some maid with pretty eyes is studying to be a doctor? The room went silent. Jake Morrison's hand moved subtly toward his hip. Vincent stopped taking notes. Marcus's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Choose your next words very carefully, Raphael. Santos held his gaze for 3 seconds, then looked away. But the damage was done. The question hung in the air. Was Marcus Dante going soft? Elena Rodriguez earned a full scholarship to Northwestern, Marcus said, his tone returning to business. She lost it because her father borrowed money from us to pay medical bills. She's not some random maid. She's an asset being wasted on cleaning floors. An asset. Tony laughed. Boss, she's a debtor. That's all. She's a future doctor who will serve the community where we operate. A doctor who understands loyalty because we gave her a second chance. Marcus tapped the table. Think strategically. How many times have we needed medical help that couldn't be reported? How many of our people die or get arrested because they have to go to hospitals that call the cops? That made them pause. Just 3 months ago, one of Tony's dealers had bled out in an alley because he was too scared to go to the ER with a gunshot wound. You want her to be our personal doctor? Vincent asked, intrigued despite himself. I want her to be a good doctor who remembers who helped her when no one else would. Marcus stood, walking to the window. But more than that, I want to start moving our operations toward legitimate business. The money laundering, the shipping company, those are sustainable. The loan sharking, the protection rackets, those paint targets on our backs.
Jesus Christ, Santos Mutered.
You're going soft. I'm being smart, Marcus corrected. The FBI has been circling for 2 years. Local politicians are under pressure to clean up the South Side. We either evolve or we end up in federal prison. Ide pra fe evolution. Jake Morrison finally spoke up, his Texas drawl cutting through the tension. Boss has a point. We've lost 6 good men to FBI stings in the last year. Maybe it's time to shift focus. You too. Santos looked around the table, searching for allies. Vincent?
Tony?
Are we really going to let one college girl change everything we've built? It's not about her, Marcus said, turning back from the window. It's about survival. But yes, touching her is the same as touching me. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave right now. No hard feelings. Just walk away. Nobody moved. But Marcus could see it in Santos's eyes, in the way Tony's jaw clenched. They weren't convinced. They were compliant, which wasn't the same thing. There's something else, Jake said, pulling out his phone. I've been monitoring chatter. The Donovan crew knows about the girl. They're asking questions about why you cleared her debt. The Donovans. Irish mob operating on the north side, always looking for weaknesses to exploit. How do they know? Marcus's voice sharpened. Someone talked. Jake looked meaningfully at Santos. The debt clearing went through multiple channels. Could have leaked anywhere. It wasn't me, Santos protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Marcus studied him for a long moment. Double her security detail when she's at the clinic. Unmarked cars, rotating schedules. She doesn't know she's being watched. That's going to cost. Tony started. I don't care what it costs. Marcus's tone left no room for argument. Someone threatens her. We respond with everything we have. Clear? Nods around the table. Reluctant, but nods nonetheless. After the meeting ended and the others filed out, Jake stayed behind. You know they're going to test you on this, he said quietly. Santos, especially. He's been grumbling about respect and old-school ways for months now. Let him grumble. Marcus poured himself a drink. As long as he follows orders. And if he doesn't? Marcus thought about his mother, about Lorenzo bleeding out, about Elena studying medical textbooks at 2 a.m. because she refused to let go of her dream. Then he's out. Permanently, if necessary, he met Jake's eyes. I meant what I said. We're evolving or we're dying. Anyone who can't see that is deadweight. Jake nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. My sister died because she couldn't afford insulin. System's broken. If this girl can help fix even a small part of it, that matters. Thanks, Jake. After Jake left, Marcus stood alone in the conference room, staring at the city lights. He could feel it, the foundation shifting beneath him. 20 years he'd ruled through fear and force, and it had worked. But fear only lasted as long as you were scarier than the alternatives. Maybe it was time for something different. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena. Saved 3 lives today. Thank you for believing in me. 3 lives. In one day. How many had he taken over the years? How many had died because of decisions he'd made, territories he'd fought over, businesses he'd destroyed? The math didn't balance. It never would. But maybe if he played this right, the equation could shift. Not to redemption, he was too far gone for that. But to something that meant his mother's death, and Lorenzo's and all the others, weren't completely meaningless. Santos was going to be a problem. Marcus could feel it. The question was whether he'd handle it before or after someone got hurt. 3 months passed in a rhythm Elena had never imagined possible. Monday through Friday, she worked at the mansion from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, she attended classes at Cook County Hospital's accelerated pre-med program. Saturdays and Sundays, she volunteered at the clinic.
It was exhausting.
It was exhilarating. It was everything she'd thought she'd lost forever. Tonight, she sat in the mansion's kitchen at 11 p.m., textbooks spread across the table, working through pharmacology problems. The house was quiet. Marcus was out on business. Mrs. Chun had gone home hours ago. Elena rubbed her tired eyes and checked her email, expecting nothing important. Instead, she found a message from the Cook County Bursar's office. Dear Ms. Rodriguez, your tuition balance for the spring semester has been paid in full by the Helena Volkov Medical Excellence Fund. Congratulations on your continued academic achievement. Elena read it 3 times, her heart pounding. Helena Volkov. That was the scholarship that had paid for her fall semester too. She'd assumed it was a general scholarship fund, something the hospital offered to returning students. But Volkov. That name meant something. She opened her laptop and searched Helena Volkov Chicago. The results made her hands shake. Helena Volkov Memorial Scholarship established 2023 by anonymous donor in honor of a county general surgical nurse who died in 1998. The year Marcus's mother died. The same Maria Dante whose surgical journal Elena had been reading for months. Volkov was Maria's maiden name. Elena sat back in her chair, the pieces falling into place. The scholarship that had appeared exactly when she needed it. The amount that perfectly covered tuition and books. The timing that aligned with her admission to the program. Marcus had done this. All of it. She heard the front door open, his footsteps in the foyer, heading toward his study. Without thinking, Elena grabbed the email printout and followed him. She found him pouring whiskey, still wearing his coat. He looked tired, older than his 40 years. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked from the doorway. Marcus turned, surprised to see her. "Tell you what?" She held up the paper. "The scholarship. Helena Volkov. That's your mother's name." For a moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he set down the whiskey bottle and gestured for her to sit. She did, perching on the edge of the leather chair across from his desk. "How did you figure it out?" "I'm good at research. It's kind of necessary for medical school." Elena's voice wavered between gratitude and something like anger. "You've been paying for everything, haven't you? The whole time?" "Yes. Why secretly? Why not just tell me?" Marcus finally sat, holding his glass but not drinking. "Because if you knew it was me, you'd feel obligated. Like you owed me something beyond what you're already doing. I didn't want that weight on you. So, instead you let me think I earned a competitive scholarship." "You did earn it." Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "I endowed the fund, but the hospital committee chooses the recipients based on merit. Your grades, your recommendations from the clinic, your entrance exam scores, those got you selected. I just made sure the money was there." Elena struggled with the emotions swirling inside her. Relief, gratitude, but also a strange sense of loss. The pride she'd felt at earning her way back was now complicated by knowing Marcus had orchestrated it all. I wanted to do this on my own, she said quietly. You are doing it on your own, Marcus's voice was gentle. You study until midnight. You work 40 hours a week between here and the clinic. You're top of your class. The only thing I did was remove the financial barrier that shouldn't have existed in the first place. That's not a small thing.
No.
But it's not everything either. He finally took a sip of whiskey. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. She was brilliant, could have been a doctor herself, but couldn't afford medical school. So she became a nurse and spent 20 years watching doctors who were half as smart as her make 10 times her salary. When she died, I had enough money for the funeral because she had a life insurance policy that cost her $50 a month she couldn't afford. Elena heard the pain in his voice, the decades-old wound still raw. I can't bring her back, Marcus continued. I can't fix the system that killed her. But I can make sure that someone with her intelligence and her dedication doesn't get crushed by the same broken system. That's not charity, Elena. That's justice. It feels like more than that. Maybe it is, Marcus met her eyes. Maybe it's also selfish. Maybe I need to believe that her life meant something beyond just being my origin story. That her dream of helping people didn't die with her. Elena looked down at the email in her hands. How much have you spent on this scholarship fund? Enough to support 10 students through full medical degrees. You're the first recipient. 10 students. Elena's voice rose. Marcus, that's a drop in the bucket compared to what I spend on lawyers and security, he waved dismissively. And considerably better for my karma, if such a thing exists. A comfortable silence settled between them. Outside the study windows, Chicago glittered in the darkness. I saw Mrs. Patterson today at the clinic, Elena said finally. She's 83, has diabetes and high blood pressure. Can't afford her medications, so she was rationing insulin. Dr. Chin gave her 3 months of supplies from our sample closet. I know Mrs. Patterson. She was my mother's friend. I called the ambulance the night she died. She remembered you. Asked if I knew the Marcus Dante who used to play basketball with the neighborhood kids. Elena smiled slightly. I said I might have met him once or twice. Marcus actually laughed a short, surprised sound. I haven't played basketball in 20 years. Maybe you should start again. Mrs. Patterson said you were good. Mrs. Patterson is kind. He stood, walking to the window. There's something else you should know. My organization is changing. Not everyone is happy about it. There may be complications. What kind of complications? The kind where people who don't like change try to send messages. Marcus turned back to her. I've assigned security to watch you. Unmarked cars, rotating schedules. You won't see them, but they're there. Elena's stomach tightened. Am I in danger? I'm making sure you're not. But I need you to be careful. Don't walk alone at night. Don't take routes you haven't taken before. If anything feels wrong, you call Jake Morrison immediately. He handed her a business card. His personal number. He'll answer any time, day or night. The reality of Marcus's world crashed back into focus. She'd been so absorbed in studying and working that she'd almost forgotten he was a crime boss. That people feared him. That his enemies might see her as a weakness to exploit. I'm putting you at risk, she said.
No.
I'm protecting you from risks that already exist. Marcus's jaw tightened. I won't apologize for helping you, Elena. But I will make sure nothing happens to you because of it. Elena stood, still holding the email. Thank you. For the scholarship, for everything. Even if you did it secretly. You're welcome. Even if you're annoyed about it. She smiled despite herself. I'm not annoyed. I'm just adjusting. Take your time. Medical school is hard enough without existential crises. Marcus walked her to the door. Get some sleep. You have class tomorrow night. How do you know my schedule? I endowed the scholarship, remember? I'm allowed to track my investment. Elena shook her head, but she was smiling. Good night, Marcus.
Good night, Elena.
She left him standing in his study, surrounded by expensive furniture and darker secrets. But tonight, he looked less like a crime boss and more like a man trying to do one good thing in a life full of bad choices. And maybe, Elena thought as she climbed the stairs to her room. That was enough. Spring arrived in Chicago with unexpected warmth, and the mansion's garden responded with an explosion of color. Elena had taken over its care from the landscaping service, not because Marcus asked, but because she needed something living to nurture between the hours of studying death and disease. She was pruning the rose bushes on a Saturday afternoon when Marcus appeared with 2 glasses of iced tea. He'd been doing this lately, finding excuses to talk to her outside the formal boundaries of employer and employee. "You didn't have to do this," he said, handing her a glass. "The landscapers come on Tuesdays." "I know, but I like it. Reminds me of my mother's garden." Elena pulled off her gloves and accepted the tea gratefully. She grew tomatoes, herbs, flowers. Said that watching things grow kept her hopeful during bad times. Marcus settled onto the stone bench nearby, loosening his tie. He'd been in meetings all morning. She'd heard raised voices from his study earlier. "How are your classes going?"
Hard.
"Good hard," though. Elena sat beside him, leaving respectful distance between them. "We're studying the cardiovascular system in depth. It's fascinating how much the heart can endure before it fails." "The heart," Marcus repeated, looking at the roses. "How much can it endure?" "More than you'd think. It can lose 40% of its muscle tissue and still pump. It can survive minutes without oxygen if the conditions are right. It's remarkably resilient. And when it's not? When it does fail?" Elena recognized the question beneath the question. "Then you need intervention. Someone who knows what they're doing, who can act quickly. Sometimes it's medication, sometimes surgery, sometimes just time and rest." She paused. "But the best approach is prevention, addressing the problems before they become crises." Marcus nodded slowly, his expression distant. "Prevention. That's harder than it sounds." "Why?" "Because it requires recognizing the problem exists. Most people don't want to believe they're sick until the symptoms are undeniable." He looked at her. "In my world, that usually means bodies." Elena had learned not to flinch at his casual mentions of violence. She was treating gunshot wounds every weekend at the clinic now. She understood what world Marcus inhabited, even if she didn't live in it. "Is that what the meetings were about this morning? Prevention?" In a manner of speaking, Marcus drank his tea. "I'm trying to shift how we operate. More legitimate business, less enforcement. It's not going smoothly. Change never does. People resist it even when they know it's necessary." Elena thought of her anatomy professor, who still insisted on teaching certain procedures the old way despite new evidence. They cling to what they know because the unknown is scarier than the familiar, even when the familiar is killing them. "That's exactly it." Marcus looked at her with something like surprise. "How did you get so wise at 24? Medical school teaches you about systems, not just bodily systems, but how systems in general work. Feedback loops, cascade failures, homeostasis. The body is constantly trying to maintain balance, but it needs the right inputs. Wrong inputs, and the whole system crashes." "And organizations. Same principle. An organization is just a body made of people instead of cells. If the inputs are toxic, fear, exploitation, violence, eventually the system fails. You might maintain control through force, but you're not maintaining health." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. A cardinal landed on the rose bush, bright red against pink petals. "My men think I've gone soft," he said finally. "That helping you means I've lost my edge. Have you?"
No.
"But I have changed. Watching Lorenzo die, finding you in the library, talking to you about prevention and systems, it's made me see things differently." He turned to face her fully. "I built an empire on fear. It worked. But empires built on fear don't last. They collapse from within because nobody truly believes in them. They just obey until they can't anymore." "So, you're trying to build something people believe in?" "I'm trying to build something that doesn't require a body count to function." Marcus's voice carried frustration and determination. "Whether I'll succeed is another question." Elena studied him, this complicated man who'd given her back her future while running an organization that destroyed others. The contradiction should have been impossible, yet here he sat talking about systems and prevention like a student considering possibilities. Can I ask you something personal? She said. You just did. But yes. Why didn't you become a doctor? You clearly have the intelligence. Your mother wanted you to go to college. What stopped you? Marcus's jaw tightened. She died, and I needed money immediately. The streets offered faster returns than classrooms. By the time I had money, I was too deep in this life to imagine another 1 inch. He looked at his hands. I convinced myself I chose this. But really, circumstances chose it, and I just didn't fight back. You could still fight back now. At 40? With a criminal record and 20 years of blood on my hands. He smiled bitterly. I don't think medical schools accept reformed mobsters, Elena.
No.
But you could invest in other things. Legal businesses, community programs, education initiatives. She gestured around the garden. You already started with the scholarship fund. That's 10 doctors who might not have existed otherwise. 10 people who will save thousands of lives over their careers. The math is exponential. Marcus looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You make it sound noble. I make it sound practical. You want your organization to survive? Give people reasons to protect it beyond fear. Become valuable to the community in ways that matter. Elena leaned forward, animated now. The clinic needs funding. We turn away 50 patients a month because we don't have supplies or equipment. Imagine if you funded an expansion. Not anonymously, openly. Marcus Dante, community benefactor. They'd think I was laundering money. At first, maybe. But money that buys insulin for diabetics and antibiotics for sick children is still money that saves lives. Eventually, the results speak louder than the source. You've thought about this. I think about a lot of things at 2 a.m. when I can't sleep, Elena smiled. Medical school insomnia is excellent for social planning. Marcus laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. You're dangerous, you know that. How so? You make me believe things are possible that I stopped believing in decades ago. He stood, straightening his suit jacket. I have another meeting in 20 minutes. But I want to continue this conversation later. About the clinic funding? About all of it. Systems, prevention, exponential math. He paused at the garden gate. For what it's worth, you'd have made a good strategist. The medical field is lucky to have you. And your organization is lucky to have you reconsidering its foundations, Elena replied. Even if your men don't see it yet. After he left, Elena returned to the roses, but her mind was elsewhere. She was seeing possibilities, not just for herself, but for what Marcus could become. What his resources could accomplish if redirected toward building instead of controlling. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Chun. Can you come in tomorrow? Emergency case load. We'll pay overtime. Elena responded immediately. I'll be there. She looked at the garden, at the roses she'd pruned and the new growth already appearing where she'd cut away the dead wood. Sometimes you had to remove what was dying to make room for what could live. Maybe that's what Marcus was trying to do with his organization. Maybe that's what they were both trying to do with their lives. The cardinal returned, singing its territorial song, claiming the space as its own. Elena understood the feeling. Declan Donovan sat in the back booth of O'Malley's pub on the north side, studying the photographs spread across the scarred wooden table. Each one showed the same young woman, leaving Cook County Hospital, boarding a bus, entering the Southside Community Health Center, walking into Marcus Dante's mansion. That's her, his lieutenant, Sean O'Brien, confirmed.
Elena Rodriguez.
24. Lives at Dante's place, works at his operation, studies to be a doctor. And Dante cleared her debt personally? Declan's Irish accent thickened when he was thinking. 135,000. Just wiped away. More than that. He's funding her entire education through some scholarship he created. My source inside Santos's crew says the man's obsessed. Watches over her like she's made of gold. Declan leaned back, fingers drumming on the table. He was 42, lean and sharp-featured, with the kind of cold intelligence that had kept him alive in a business where most men died young. The Donovans controlled the North Side through a combination of political connections and strategic violence. They'd been trying to push into Dante's territory for 3 years with limited success. Marcus Dante was too careful, too protected, too powerful. But everyone had a weakness. And Dante's was currently treating patients at a community clinic with minimal security. What do we know about her? Declan asked. Sean consulted his notes. Smart. Real smart. Full scholarship to Northwestern. Dropped out to pay her father's medical debts. Works at the clinic every weekend. Classes Tuesday and Thursday nights. Dante's got unmarked security on her, but it's light. 2 guys in rotation. Not his top people. Because he doesn't want her to know she's being watched.
Exactly.
Pride thing, maybe. Doesn't want her thinking she's a prisoner. Declan studied the most recent photo. Elena leaving the clinic at dusk, medical bag over her shoulder, looking tired but content. Young. Innocent. The kind of person who had no business being anywhere near their world. Perfect leverage. What's the play? Sean asked. Snatch her. Demand territory in exchange. Too crude. Dante would come at us with everything he has, and we'd end up in a war that bleeds both sides dry. Declan tapped the photograph. No, we need to be smarter. We make him think someone else is the threat. I don't follow.
Santos Declan's Millet.
Word is he's unhappy about Dante going soft, about losing his loan operation. What if we make it look like Santos is making a move against the girl? Dante takes out his own man. We watch the organization tear itself apart from the inside.
Sangrind.
And then we move in during the chaos. Precisely, Declan gathered the photographs. But we need to be careful. Just enough pressure to make Dante paranoid, not enough to actually harm the girl. We're not animals. Some might say we are. Those people are thinking too small, Declan stood, buttoning his coat. Animals react. We plan. That's why we're still here, and most of our competitors are in prison or the ground. 2 days later, Elena was leaving the clinic after a particularly brutal shift. 3 gunshot wounds, 2 overdoses, and a domestic violence case that had made her sick to her stomach. Dr. Chun had sent her home early, seeing the exhaustion in her eyes. The bus stop was half a block away. The street was quiet. Most businesses had closed for the evening, and the usual crowds had thinned. Elena pulled her coat tighter against the March wind and checked her phone. A text from Marcus. Jake will pick you up tonight. Don't take the bus. She started to reply when she noticed the car. Black sedan, tinted windows, parked across the street with the engine running. It hadn't been there when she arrived this morning. Elena's heart rate picked up. She thought about Jake's warning from weeks ago. If anything feels wrong, call immediately. She dialed his number.
Elena.
Jake answered on the first ring. Where are you? Outside the clinic.
There's a car watching me.
Black sedan, Illinois plates. She squinted at the license plate, but it was too dark to make out the numbers clearly. Stay visible. Stay near the clinic entrance. I'm 3 minutes away. The sedan's door opened. A man stepped out, mid-30s, expensive suit, wrong for this neighborhood. He didn't approach her directly, but lit a cigarette, leaning against the car in a way that said he wasn't hiding. Elena's medical training kicked in. She noted details automatically. 6 feet tall, athletic build, no visible weapons, but definitely carrying, scar above his left eyebrow, confident posture. Not immediately threatening, but not friendly either. He met her eyes across the street and nodded. Just once. Then he got back in the car and drove away slowly, deliberately, making sure she saw him leave. A message. But what kind? Jake's truck screeched to a stop at the curb 30 seconds later. He jumped out, hand inside his jacket where Elena knew he kept his gun. Where?
Gone.
Black sedan. Headed north. Elena's hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. He didn't do anything. Just looked at me and left. Jake's jaw tightened. Get in the truck. During the drive to the mansion, Jake made 3 phone calls, his voice clipped and professional. Elena caught fragments. Confirmed sighting. Sending the description now. Double the detail. I don't care what it costs. Jake, what's happening? Someone's testing us. Seeing how we react, how tight your security is, he glanced at her. The good news is they're being careful, which means they don't want to actually hurt you. Yet. That's the good news. In our world, yes, Jake turned onto the mansion street. The bad news is it means someone's planning something bigger. This was reconnaissance. Marcus was waiting in the foyer when they arrived, his expression thunderous. Tell me. Jake gave a rapid briefing while Elena stood by, feeling like a child while adults discussed the danger she was in. She hated it. Hated being the weakness, the vulnerability, the thing that needed protecting. It could be Donovan's, Jake finished. Could be Santos making a move. Could be someone else entirely. Find out. Marcus's voice was ice. I want to know who sent that car and why. And Elena doesn't go anywhere without a full security team until we know. Marcus, I have class tomorrow night. Elena started. Which you'll attend. With 4 armed guards and 2 vehicles, he looked at her, and she saw fear beneath the anger. I won't apologize for keeping you alive, Elena. I'm not asking you to. I'm just. She struggled to articulate the feeling. I don't want to be the reason people get hurt. You're not. The people threatening you are the reason people might get hurt. Marcus moved closer, his voice softening. This isn't your fault. This is the cost of being associated with me. If I could change that, I would. Would you? The question came out before Elena could stop it. Would you actually walk away from all this if you could? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. But I know I won't let anything happen to you. Later that night, alone in her room, Elena looked at her medical textbooks and felt the weight of her situation. She was studying to save lives while being used as a chess piece in games that ended with bodies. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Tell Dante that debts get paid. One way or another. Elena's blood ran cold. She immediately forwarded it to Jake and Marcus. The response came within seconds from Marcus. Don't reply. Don't delete. We're tracing it now. She sat on her bed, holding the phone, and realized something had shifted. She wasn't just a student anymore, or a maid, or even a future doctor. She was a target. And somewhere in Chicago, people were planning how to use her. Elena's Tuesday night class ended at 9 p.m. She walked out of Cook County Hospital with 2 classmates, discussing the finer points of respiratory physiology. Jake's security team, 2 men in front, 2 behind, maintained their distance but stayed visible. Marcus had made good on his promise. I still don't understand why you need bodyguards, her classmate Priya said, eyeing the men nervously. Are you dating someone dangerous? It's complicated, Elena replied, which was the understatement of the year. They said goodbye at the parking lot. Elena headed toward the black SUV where Jake waited, her medical bag heavy on her shoulder. She was thinking about the quiz next week, about the patient she'd treated on Saturday with pneumonia, about anything except the danger she was supposedly in. The attack came fast. A van screeched up beside her. The side door flew open. 2 men in ski masks grabbed her before she could scream, yanking her inside with brutal efficiency. She heard shouting, Jake's voice, then gunshots, but the van was already moving, tires squealing. Someone zip-tied her wrists. A cloth bag went over her head, drowning her in darkness and the smell of burlap and sweat. Don't hurt her, a voice said. Boss wants her intact. Elena's medical training fought against her panic. Stay calm. Assess. Survive. She focused on breathing, on counting heartbeats, on anything that kept her from screaming. The drive took 15 minutes, she counted. The van made 7 turns. They were heading east based on the sun's position when she'd been taken. Details. She needed details. When they pulled her out, she heard water lapping against wood. A dock, maybe. Abandoned warehouse district by the smell, rust and old fish and decay. They shoved her into a chair, and someone cut the zip ties only to replace them with rope. Tighter. More painful. The bag came off. Elena blinked in the dim light. She was in a warehouse, as suspected. Empty except for scattered crates and 3 men in masks. No windows, 1 door. Exit strategy. Limited. She cataloged her surroundings with the same clinical detachment she used for examining patients. Marcus Dante's little pet, one of them said. He was the tallest, the leader. Not so protected after all. What do you want? Elena kept her voice steady. Leverage.
Territory.
The usual. He pulled out a phone. We're going to call your boss, make some demands, see how much he values your life. He won't negotiate with you. That's where you're wrong, sweetheart. He cleared your debt, paid for your fancy school, lets you live in his mansion. Man's got feelings for you, whether he admits it or not. Elena thought fast. These men had made mistakes already. They'd taken off her bag. She could identify them later. They were talking, giving away information. And they'd left her medical bag on the floor near the door when they'd searched it. Inside that bag was a scalpel she'd borrowed from the clinic to practice suturing. She'd forgotten to return it. I need my inhaler, Elena gasped, making her breath wheeze. Asthma. In my bag. Please. The men exchanged looks. The leader cursed. Check it. The shorter one rummaged through her bag, pulling out the inhaler. He brought it to her, held it to her mouth while she pretended to take a puff. Again, she wheezed.
Need.
More. He leaned closer, focused on the inhaler. Elena's fingers found the scalpel she'd palmed when he'd set her bag down to untie one hand. Medical school had taught her exactly where the radial artery ran in the forearm. She'd dissected enough cadavers to know the anatomy by heart. She slashed upward in one clean motion. The man screamed, blood spraying. The leader lunged for her, but Elena was already moving. She'd spent 3 years cleaning floors on her knees. Her legs were stronger than they looked. She kicked hard, catching him in the knee. He stumbled. Elena ran for the door, hands still partially bound, the scalpel slippery with blood. Behind her, the men were shouting, but she'd already committed to the escape. No going back. The door was unlocked, another mistake. She burst through into the night, into blessed darkness and cold air. The docks stretched before her, maze-like and industrial. She heard footsteps pounding behind her.
Run.
Assess later. Run now. She darted between shipping containers, her medical training screaming at her about the man she'd cut. The radial artery. If they didn't apply pressure, he'd bleed out in minutes. Part of her wanted to go back, to help, to do no harm like she'd promised. But survival came first. Elena found a narrow space between 2 containers and squeezed in, biting back a whimper as the metal scraped her shoulders. She could hear them searching, cursing, calling out. Find her.
Now.
She forced herself to breathe quietly, to slow her racing heart. Her hands were still bound with rope, but loosely. She worked at the knots with her teeth, tasting blood and dirt. 10 minutes passed.
20.
The searching became more distant. Elena pulled out her phone with shaking hands. They'd never checked her pockets, another mistake. But it was smashed, probably from when they'd grab her. The screen was black. She stayed hidden until she heard sirens. Police? Or Marcus's people? She couldn't tell, but the searchers scattered fast. Elena waited another 5 minutes, then emerged cautiously. The warehouse was empty now. She saw blood on the concrete where she'd cut the man. Too much blood. She grabbed a t-shirt from a pile of abandoned clothes and tied it around her arm where the rope had cut into her skin. Makeshift bandage. Better than nothing. Her medical bag was still by the warehouse door. She grabbed it and ran. She made it 3 blocks before the SUV found her. Jake jumped out, his face pale in the streetlights.
Jesus Christ, Elena.
I'm okay. Her voice shook despite her words.
I'm okay.
You're bleeding. Not my blood. Mostly, she let him guide her into the SUV, where Marcus waited with an expression of barely controlled rage. Who took you? He demanded. Did you see faces? Masks.
3 men.
Professional. Elena's hands wouldn't stop shaking. They wanted leverage. Territory. They were going to call you. They never got the chance. Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. We tracked your phone's last location. Found the warehouse. But you weren't there. Because I left, Elena met his eyes. I wasn't going to wait to be saved, Marcus. I saved myself. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression. Not relief, but something deeper. Respect. You cut one of them, Jake said, examining her hands. Got his DNA under your nails, his blood on your clothes. That's evidence. Radial artery, Elena said, her medical mind cataloging the damage she'd done. If they didn't get him to a hospital in 15 minutes, he's dead. Good, Marcus said flatly. Elena looked at him, at the man who'd given her a second chance, and saw the violence that lived beneath his surface. The reminder of what world she'd entered. I didn't want to hurt him, she said quietly. I just wanted to live. Then you did the right thing. Marcus took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. And you're never leaving my sight again. Marcus stood in the warehouse where Elena had been held, staring at the pool of blood on the concrete floor. Jake was coordinating with their forensics contact, a retired cop who asked no questions and found all the answers. The other men swept the perimeter, looking for anything the kidnappers had left behind. But Marcus only saw the blood. Elena's blood mixed with her attackers. Evidence of violence she should never have had to commit. Boss, Jake approached carefully. We found shell casings. 9mm. Same round Santos's crew uses. Marcus's jaw tightened. You're sure? Not 100%, but it's a hell of a coincidence. Jake pulled out his phone, showing photos. And we found this in the trash outside, a receipt from O'Malley's pub north side. Donovan territory. So either Santos is working with the Donovans, or someone wants me to think he is. Marcus walked the perimeter of the warehouse, his mind calculating possibilities. Either way, this was coordinated. Professional. Elena said 3 men, masks, efficient grab. They knew her schedule, knew our security pattern. Jake hesitated. We have a leak, Marcus. I know. Marcus had known since the threatening text. Someone in his organization was feeding information to enemies. The question was who and how deep it went.
His phone rang. Vincent Hayes, his money man.
Talk to me, Marcus answered. Just got word from my contact at County General. A man came in 40 minutes ago with a severed radial artery. Bled out before they could save him. No ID, no phone, nothing. But he had a tattoo, shamrock with a crown. That's Donovan, Inc. Marcus closed his eyes. Elena had killed someone. She'd used her medical knowledge, the knowledge he'd helped her reclaim, to take a life. The irony was suffocating. What else? He asked. The other 2 guys who brought him and dumped him at the ER and ran. Security cameras caught their plates. Already running them through my system. Send me everything. Marcus ended the call and looked at Jake. Elena killed one of them. Donovan crew. Jake whistled low. That's going to complicate things. No, Marcus's voice was cold. That's going to end things. Declan Donovan crossed a line. He put hands on someone under my protection. There's only one response to that.
Va?
Surgical removal. Marcus started walking toward the SUV. Get Tony and Vincent. We're having a meeting. Tonight. Back at the mansion, Elena sat in the kitchen with Mrs. Chen, who was treating her rope burns with antibiotic ointment. The older woman worked in silence, her expression a mixture of concern and something Elena couldn't quite identify. I've worked for Mr. Dante for 15 years, Mrs. Chen said quietly. This is the first time someone he cares about has been hurt on my watch.
I'm sorry, Elena.
It's not your fault. Maybe not. But I should have seen it coming. The way his men have been acting, the tension in the house, she finished bandaging Elena's wrists. He's different because of you. Softer in some ways, harder in others. It's made some people nervous. People like Santos. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened slightly. You're perceptive.
I'm observant.
There's a difference. Elena flexed her hands, testing the bandages. Santos lost his operation because of me. Marcus changed the rules because he saw what predatory lending did to my family. That makes me a problem for people who profit from the old ways. You're also a solution for people who see where this organization is headed. Mrs. Chen poured tea for both of them. Mr. Dante is trying to build something legitimate. something that lasts beyond fear and force. You represent that future, which is why you're dangerous to both his enemies and some of his allies. Elena sipped the tea, letting the warmth steady her. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, but her mind kept replaying the moment the scalpel had cut through flesh. The hot spray of blood. The man's scream. "I killed someone tonight," she said. Mrs. Chen didn't flinch.
You survived.
In this world, that's what matters. I'm studying to be a doctor. To save lives, not take them. And you will save many lives. Hundreds, maybe thousands over your career. The older woman's voice was gentle but firm. What happened tonight was self-defense. The man who died made choices that led to his death. You made choices that led to your survival. Don't confuse the 2-inch. The kitchen door opened. Marcus entered, and Mrs. Chen quietly excused herself. Marcus sat across from Elena, his tie loosened, exhaustion evident in the lines around his eyes. For a long moment, neither spoke. "The man I cut," Elena finally said. "He's dead." "I know. He died because I knew exactly where to cut. Because I've studied anatomy, dissected cadavers, learned where every artery runs," her voice cracked. "I used my medical knowledge to kill someone." "You used your medical knowledge to survive," Marcus leaned forward. "Elena, look at me." She met his eyes. "You did nothing wrong. Those men took you with the intention of using you to hurt me. They would have killed you once they got what they wanted, or kept you as ongoing leverage. You saw an opportunity and you took it. That's not murder. That's survival. It doesn't feel like survival. It feels like I became something I swore I'd never be." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "When I was 19, I killed a man for the first time. He was trying to rob my mother's friend, Mrs. Patterson. I stopped him. Used a pipe from a construction site, hit him in the head. He died 3 days later from a brain hemorrhage." Elena stared at him. He'd never told her this story. "I threw up for an hour afterward," Marcus continued. "I couldn't sleep for weeks. I kept seeing his face, hearing the sound the pipe made when it connected. I thought I'd become a monster." He looked down at his hands. "My mother told me that what defines us isn't the violence we're forced into, it's what we choose to do with the life that violence preserves. She said I could let guilt destroy me, or I could use that guilt to ensure I never became someone who chose violence first. Did it work? For a while. Then she died, and I made different choices." His expression hardened. "But you're not me, Elena. You have a chance to be exactly what you set out to be, a doctor who saves lives. What happened tonight doesn't change that. If anything, it proves you're strong enough to survive the worst this world can throw at you." Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes.
I am scared, Marcus.
Scared that I'm changing into someone I don't recognize. Scared that being around you, around this world, is turning me into something else. Then leave. The words hung in the air between them. "What?"
Elena whispered. "Leave. Tonight."
"I'll set you up somewhere safe, somewhere far from Chicago. New identity, clean slate, full funding for medical school, wherever you want to go." Marcus's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the cost of the offer. "You can walk away from all of this. From me, from the danger, from the choices you had to make tonight. I won't stop you." Elena looked at this man who had given her back her future, who had protected her even when it complicated his own life, who was now offering to let her go because he thought it was what she needed. She thought about the clinic, about Carlos and his mother, about Mrs. Patterson and her rationed insulin. She thought about the scholarship fund that would help 9 other students after her. She thought about the possibility of changing things from inside this complicated, dangerous world. "No," she said finally.
No.
"I'm not leaving." Elena straightened her shoulders. "What happened tonight was terrifying, but I'm not running from it. Those men wanted to use me as a weakness. I refuse to be that. I refuse to let fear dictate my choices." Marcus studied her face, seeing the steel beneath the fear. "You understand what staying means? This won't be the last time someone tries to use you against me. Then we make sure I'm not a weakness. We make sure I'm prepared." Elena's voice grew stronger. I'm not helpless, Marcus. Tonight proved that. So stop treating me like something fragile that needs to be hidden away. I'm part of this now, whether either of us planned it. A slow smile crossed Marcus's face, the first genuine smile she'd seen since the kidnapping. You're remarkable, you know that? I'm terrified and furious and determined. That's not the same as remarkable. In my experience, it's exactly the same. Marcus stood, extending his hand. Okay,
You stay. But we do this right.
self-defense training, security protocols, everything you need to never be caught off guard again. Elena shook his hand. Agreed. As she headed to her room, Elena realized something had fundamentally shifted. She wasn't Marcus Dante's charity case anymore. She wasn't just a student or a maid or a symbol of his redemption. She was a survivor. And survivors didn't hide. They prepared. 6 months passed in a blur of intensive training and hard-won stability. Elena threw herself into medical school with renewed focus, while Marcus systematically dismantled the Donovan operation. It wasn't a war, it was more surgical than that. Frozen assets, exposed political corruption, key lieutenants flipping to avoid federal charges. Declan Donovan fled to Ireland with the FBI breathing down his neck. Santos had been quietly removed from the organization, relocated to Miami with a generous severance package and a clear understanding that returning to Chicago would be fatal. The threat was contained. The organization was evolving. And Elena was thriving. She was in her final semester of pre-med when Marcus called her to his study on a Tuesday evening. The room smelled like leather and old books, familiar now after so many late-night conversations about systems and prevention and building something better. I have news, Marcus said, gesturing for her to sit. And a confession. Elena settled into the chair across from his desk, noting the envelope in his hands. Official-looking. Important. The confession first, Marcus began. The Helena Volkov Scholarship Fund. I told you the hospital committee chose the recipients based on merit. They did. You showed me the selection criteria. They did, he agreed. But I may have neglected to mention that I'm on the selection committee, and that I had final approval on all candidates. Elena stared at him. Marcus. Let me finish, he held up the envelope. This arrived today. You've been accepted to the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Full scholarship, housing stipend, research opportunities. You start in September. The words didn't process immediately. Johns Hopkins. One of the best medical schools in the world. Baltimore. Across the country. How? She whispered. Your MCAT scores were exceptional. Your recommendations from Dr. Chun and your professors were glowing. Your personal essay about using medicine to serve underserved communities was apparently very compelling. Marcus smiled slightly. And yes, I may have made some calls. But Elena, they wanted you. The acceptance is real. The scholarship is legitimate. You earned this. Elena looked at the envelope like it might disappear. Baltimore is 800 miles away. I know. I'd have to leave the clinic. Leave Mrs. Chen, Dr. Rivera, all the patients I've been treating. They'll miss you. But they'll also be proud of you. Marcus leaned forward. Elena, you've done everything you set out to do here. You've reclaimed your education, proven your abilities, helped dozens of people at the clinic. But Cook County is preparing you to be a good doctor. Johns Hopkins will prepare you to be a great 1-inch. What about you? The question came out before she could stop it. What about the organization, the changes you're making? We'll continue with or without you. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. Elena, I didn't give you a second chance so you could spend it being grateful to me. I gave it to you so you could become who you were always meant to be. And that person isn't someone who stays in Chicago out of obligation. Elena felt tears burning. It's not obligation. You gave me my life back. You protected me, believed in me. And now I'm setting you free. Marcus stood, walking to the window. When my mother died, I made choices based on fear and anger. I built an empire, but I lost myself in the process. You have a chance to build something different. Something that actually matters. Your organization matters. The scholarship fund, the changes you're making to move toward legitimate business. Those things matter because you showed me they could, Marcus turned back to her. But they're my redemption project, not yours. You don't owe me your future, Elena. So that's it. Elena's voice rose. You decide I should go to Baltimore, and I just
Go.
Yes, Marcus's expression hardened slightly. Because if I let you stay, I'm being selfish. I'm keeping you here because having you around reminds me that I'm capable of doing good things. But that's not fair to you. You deserve to live your own life, make your own choices, without the weight of my world on your shoulders. Elena stood, anger and gratitude and grief swirling together. You don't get to decide what's fair for me.
No.
But I can tell you what I see. Marcus moved closer, his voice dropping. I see someone brilliant who's wasting energy worrying about a man who'll be fine without her. I see someone who could revolutionize emergency medicine or become a surgeon general or cure something, but instead she's staying in Chicago because she feels like she owes me something. That's not why. Isn't it? Marcus challenged. Be honest. If I hadn't helped you, if you didn't feel connected to me and this organization, would you even hesitate about Johns Hopkins? Elena opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. He was right. Of course he was right. I don't want to leave, she said quietly. This place, these people, they've become my family. And they always will be. But families don't keep you small. They push you to become more. Marcus picked up the envelope and held it out. The world needs your hands more than I need your service. Elena took the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside was the official acceptance letter, a housing assignment, a full breakdown of the scholarship, named she noticed after Maria Dante. Not Helena Volkov this time. Marcus's mother's married name, public and proud. You're not just funding this, she realized. You're making it public. Your name on the scholarship. Moving toward legitimate business means owning the good along with the bad, Marcus smiled. Besides, I'm tired of hiding the few decent things I've done. Let people think what they want. Elena read through the letter, each word solidifying the reality. This was happening. Her dream, the one she'd thought was dead, was not only alive but exceeding her wildest expectations. When would I leave? She asked. You have 4 months to finish your semester here, say your goodbyes, and prepare. Jake will help coordinate the move. I've already purchased an apartment near campus, security-controlled building, good neighborhood. It's yours, no strings attached. Marcus.
No arguments.
You're brilliant and capable, but you're also someone dangerous people might still want to hurt to get to me. I won't apologize for ensuring your safety. Elena looked at him, at this complicated man who'd given her everything while asking for nothing in return, who was now pushing her away because he loved her enough to let her go. Not romantic love. Something deeper. The love of someone who sees your potential and refuses to let you settle for less. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. For all of it. For believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Thank you for reminding me that power can be used for something other than control. Marcus extended his hand. Go to Baltimore. Become the doctor you're meant to be. Save lives. Change the system. And don't look back. Elena shook his hand, knowing that this handshake was goodbye to one chapter and hello to another. I'll come back, she said. After I graduate. I'll come back and open a practice here, serve the community. Only if you want to, Marcus interrupted. Not because you feel you owe me. If you come back, it's because you choose to. That's the only way this works. That night, Elena sat in her room, surrounded by medical textbooks and acceptance letters and the weight of impossible choices that somehow felt right. She thought about her father, about the promise she'd made on his deathbed. She thought about Carlos and his mother, about Mrs. Patterson, about all the people who needed doctors who understood what it meant to be powerless. And she thought about Marcus, who'd taken his pain and anger and slowly, painfully, was transforming it into something that built instead of destroyed. 4 months until Baltimore. 4 months to say goodbye to the life that had saved her and hello to the life she'd always dreamed of living. Elena looked at the acceptance letter one more time, at the Maria Dante Scholarship emblazoned at the top. She was going to make that name mean something. She was going to make them both proud. For years later, Elena stood in front of a modest building on the south side of Chicago. The sign above the door read, Maria Dante Community Health Center, quality care for all. She'd graduated from Johns Hopkins top of her class, completed her emergency medicine residency at Mass General, and turned down positions at prestigious hospitals across the country. Because she'd made a promise. To her father, to herself, to the people who'd believed in her. She was coming home. The clinic was different from the cramped space where she'd volunteered years ago. This one had modern equipment for examination rooms, a small surgical suite for minor procedures, and a full pharmacy that could provide medications at cost. Marcus had purchased the building 2 years ago, renovated it completely, and held it waiting for her decision. Elena pushed open the door. Inside, Dr. Sarah Chin looked up from organizing supplies and broke into a smile. Welcome back, Dr. Rodriguez. The title still felt surreal. Dr. Rodriguez. All those years of studying, of fighting to reclaim what she'd lost, had led to this moment. It's good to be back, Elena said, looking around. This is incredible, Sarah.
Marcus Perd no es pense.
State-of-the-art equipment, full staffing budget, enough funding for 5 years of operations. Sarah handed her a folder. We're already booked solid for the first month. Word spread fast that you were opening a free clinic. Not free. Sliding scale. No one turned away, but people pay what they can. Elena had been adamant about that. Dignity mattered as much as charity. The afternoon was spent setting up her office, reviewing patient files, and reconnecting with familiar faces. Mrs. Patterson stopped by with homemade cookies, tears streaming down her face as she hugged Elena. Your father would be so proud, the old woman whispered. And Maria, she'd be proud too. At 6 p.m., as the last staff member left, Elena heard footsteps in the waiting room. Marcus stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of tea. He looked older, threads of gray at his temples, lines around his eyes, but also somehow lighter. Less burdened. Thought you might need this, he said, offering her a cup. Elena took it, gesturing to the chairs in her office. They sat across from each other, just like they had in his kitchen 4 years ago, when this all began. The clinic is beautiful, Elena said. Thank you. You earned it. Every square foot. Marcus looked around the office, at her medical degree framed on the wall, at the photos of her with patients from her residency. How is Baltimore? Challenging. Rewarding. Exactly what I needed. Elena sipped her tea. I treated gunshot wounds, overdoses, heart attacks. All the things I saw on the South Side, but with better resources. It taught me what's possible when money isn't the barrier. And now you're bringing that knowledge home. Someone has to. Elena met his eyes. The system's still broken, Marcus. People still die because they can't afford care. But this clinic, it's a start. One neighborhood, one patient at a time. Marcus nodded slowly. I heard you turned down a position at Northwestern Hospital. 6-figure salary, full benefits, prestigious emergency department. I did.
Why?
Because Carlos and his mother don't go to Northwestern. Mrs. Patterson doesn't go to Northwestern. The construction workers and single parents and uninsured immigrants who need help, they don't go to prestigious hospitals. Elena set down her tea. I didn't become a doctor to serve the people who already have access to care. I became a doctor to serve the people who don't. Your father would be proud, Marcus said quietly. I hope so. Elena's voice caught slightly. I think about him every day, about the promise I made. This clinic, it's that promise finally kept. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the city sounds outside. Car horns, distant sirens. Life continuing its chaotic rhythm. I have something for you, Marcus said, pulling out an envelope. The scholarship fund. It's grown. We've put 23 students through medical school so far. 5 have graduated, including you. The others are in various stages of training. Elena opened the envelope and saw the list of names, their schools, their specialties. Emergency medicine, pediatrics, family practice, surgery. a constellation of healers spreading across the country. 23 lives changed, she whispered. 23 doctors who might save thousands of patients over their careers. Exponential math, Marcus said with a slight smile.
You taught me that.
I taught you.
Elena laughed.
Marcus, you gave me everything. My education, my future, my life back.
No.
I gave you an opportunity. You did everything else. He stood, walking to the window that overlooked the street. The organization is almost entirely legitimate now. Shipping, real estate, a security consulting firm. We still have our complicated aspects, but we're not what we were. Because of what happened to me. Because of what you showed me was possible, Marcus turned back to her. You asked me once if I'd walk away from this life, if I could. I said I didn't know. But watching you become who you were meant to be, seeing what happens when power is used to build instead of destroy, that answered the question. And
Elena prompted.
And I'm trying. Every day. It's not redemption. I'm too far gone for that. But it's something. It's better. He moved toward the door. I should let you finish setting up. Marcus, wait, Elena stood. I meant what I said 4 years ago. About coming back. This isn't obligation or gratitude. This is choice. I chose to come back because this is where I'm needed. Where I can make the most difference. I know. That's why it means something. They walked to the clinic entrance together. Outside, the south side spread before them. Rough and resilient, struggling and surviving, exactly as it had always been. But maybe, just maybe, a little bit better than before. Same time next week? Marcus asked. I'd like to hear how the first week goes. Same time, Elena agreed. Bring the tea. He smiled, that rare, genuine expression she'd learned to treasure, and walked to his car where Jake waited. Elena stood in the doorway of her clinic, watching Marcus drive away. She thought about the scared young woman she'd been, studying medical books in secret, convinced her dreams were dead. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the fear, the violence, the impossible generosity, the hard-won education. A teenager approached the clinic, limping slightly. Elena recognized the look, someone who needed help but wasn't sure if they could afford it. We're closed for today, Elena called out, but come back tomorrow at 8 a.m. We'll take care of you. How much does it cost? The teenager asked nervously. Whatever you can afford. And if that's nothing, that's okay too, Elena smiled. We're here to help. That's all that matters. The teenager nodded, relief visible even from a distance, and limped away. Elena returned to her office and looked at the photo on her desk. Her father, smiling, healthy, before the cancer had taken him. Beside it, a photo of Marcus's mother in her nursing scrubs, the one he'd given her years ago. I kept my promise, Dad, she whispered. To both of you. She picked up her patient files for tomorrow. 15 people who needed care, who deserved care, who would receive care regardless of their ability to pay. The dream was real. The circle was complete. And in a neighborhood that had known too much pain, a small light was shining a little brighter. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was home.